"I'm going back to my ex," my wife said after 15 years of marriage. "And I'm taking half of everything," she smirked. I just nodded. The next day, her sister called me, panicking. "My God, what did you tell her?" I, 43M, never thought I'd be the guy posting his life's wreckage on the internet, but here we are. I'm a logistics consultant, the kind of guy who fixes broken supply chains for a living. I look for inefficiencies, cut dead weight, and optimize flow. My life was a spreadsheet, organized, profitable, and, I thought, secure. My wife, 40F, was the variable I couldn't calculate. She was an interior decorator, a title she held mostly because I funded her LLC, paid for her studio, and covered the losses every tax season. We lived in a custom build in the Chicago suburbs, the kind of place with a heated driveway and a kitchen island bigger than my first apartment. It looked like the American dream. It was actually a very expensive cage. The end didn't happen with a bang. There was no screaming match, no throwing vases. It happened on a Tuesday over cold lasagna. I had just come home from a 10-hour day, dealing with a shipping crisis in the port of LA, and my brain was fried. I sat down, loosened my tie, and started eating. She was sitting across from me, scrolling on her phone. She put the phone down, wiped her mouth with a linen napkin, and looked me dead in the eye. "I'm leaving you," she said. Her voice was terrifyingly even. "I'm going back to my ex. We've been talking for 6 months. He gets me. He understands my soul. You just understand numbers." I stopped chewing. The ex. I knew exactly who she meant. The musician she dated in college. The guy who cheated on her twice, borrowed $5,000 from her dad that he never paid back, and lived in a van by choice. That guy. "Okay," I said. It was the only word I could find. I didn't feel the panic I probably should have. I felt a strange, cold clarity. She seemed annoyed by my lack of devastation. She leaned forward, the diamond earrings I bought for our 10th anniversary catching the light. "I've already retained counsel," she said, reciting a script she had clearly rehearsed. "Since I supported your career by managing the domestic sphere, I'm entitled to maintain my standard of living. I'm taking half. Half the house, half the retirement accounts, half the brokerage, and half the business shares." She smirked. It wasn't a smile. It was a facial expression of absolute triumph mixed with pity. "Don't try to fight it. You'll just waste money on lawyers. We're in an equitable distribution state, but given the duration of the marriage, a judge is going to give me exactly what I want. I'm taking the master bedroom tonight. You can sleep in the guest room until you find an apartment." I looked at her. I looked at the kitchen we renovated 2 years ago because she didn't like the shade of granite. I looked at the woman I had supported for 15 years. "If that's what you think is right," I said. She blinked, confused by the total surrender. "It is what's right. I'm glad you're being sensible for once." I stood up, took my plate to the sink, rinsed it, and placed it in the dishwasher. "Actually, I'll stay at a hotel. Less friction that way." I walked out of the kitchen, went upstairs, and packed a single suitcase. I didn't look back at the room we shared. I didn't look at the wedding photos in the hallway. I walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove to the Hyatt downtown. The moment I checked into my room, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from our home security system. Front door unlocked. Then another, unknown face detected. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed and pulled up the camera feed. A man walked into my house carrying a duffel bag. He looked like an aged, waterlogged version of the guy from her old yearbooks. Leather jacket, graying hair tied back in a messy bun. He walked into my living room, put his dirty boots up on my coffee table, the imported teak one I loved, and cracked open a beer. She hadn't just left me. She had moved him in 20 minutes after I walked out. The level of entitlement was breathtaking. She felt so secure in her ownership of my life that she replaced me before the engine of my car was cold. The next morning, the war began. She didn't wait for legal proceedings to start spending. I received an alert from our joint checking account at 9 a.m., a withdrawal of $18,000. It was nearly the entire liquid balance we kept for household expenses. She left exactly $12.50. Then came an email from her lawyer. A standard, aggressive opening salvo demanding spousal support, exclusive use of the marital residence, and an immediate freeze on all my business assets to prevent dissipation of marital funds. She was trying to strangle me financially to force a quick settlement. She knew my wealth was tied up in business equity and real estate. She thought if she drained the cash, I'd panic and sign whatever she put in front of me just to stop the bleeding. I sat in my office, staring at the demand letter. My business partner, let's call him Dave, walked in. He looked pale. "Did you see Facebook?" asked Dave. "I don't check Facebook," I said. He turned his phone around. She had posted a long, tearful status update. No names, but the context was clear to anyone who knew us. She claimed she had escaped a loveless, controlling environment and was finally choosing happiness over oppression. She wrote about how she had sacrificed her prime years for a man who didn't appreciate her art. The comments were a cesspool. Our mutual friends, people I had hosted at 4th of July barbecues, people I had loaned money to when they were tight, were calling me a monster. They were praising her bravery. The ex had commented with 3 heart emojis and a flexing arm emoji. She was burning the bridge and salting the earth. She wanted to ensure I had no support system left. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. Not a strip mall divorce attorney, but Jim, the corporate shark who handled my business litigation. "She filed," I said. "I see it," Jim replied, the sound of furious typing in the background. "She's asking for the moon. She wants 50% of the consultancy firm based on emotional contribution to your success. She's claiming her interior design work on your home office contributed to your productivity." "Let her ask," I said. "Execute the protocol." "Are you sure? It's going to be nuclear." "She moved him into the house, Jim. She drained the joint account. She's slandering me publicly. Executed." "Understood. We'll file the response by end of day." I hung up. The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in dirty tricks. Since I had voluntarily left the house, her lawyer filed an emergency motion arguing I had abandoned the property, cementing her right to stay there. She started charging things to the joint credit cards I hadn't managed to close yet. Not groceries, luxury items. A new wardrobe, 2 first-class tickets to Cabo for emotional recovery. She was maxing out lines of credit that were in my name, assuming the court would split the debt later or force me to pay it as part of maintaining the status quo. She sent me texts taunting me. "Wife, the lawyer says you haven't responded to the settlement offer. Stop dragging this out. You know I'm going to win. Just sign the checks and let us live our lives." "Wife, the Jag is making a weird noise. You need to pay for the repairs." "Wife, the songs the ex and I are writing are the best I've ever created. You should have supported my talents when you had the chance."
Service. My lawyer says you're responsible for vehicle maintenance until the divorce is final. She was driving my Jaguar F-Type, the car I spent 5 years restoring with my own hands. Seeing the GPS tracker show it parked at local bars until 2 a.m. every night made my blood boil. I didn't reply. I maintained total radio silence. This infuriated her more than screaming would have. She wanted a reaction. She wanted to be the victim of my anger. I gave her nothing but void. Then her sister called. My sister-in-law had always been the level-headed one. She tolerated her sister's drama but never participated in it. "My God," she whispered into the phone. She sounded like she was hyperventilating. "What did you tell her?" "I haven't spoken to her in 3 weeks," I said calmly. "No, I mean, she's panicking. She's at my house. She's screaming that you're trying to starve her. She went to use the credit card at the grocery store, Whole Foods, obviously, and it was declined. She tried the other one, declined. She called the bank and they told her the accounts are frozen pending a fraud investigation." "Standard procedure," I said calmly. "When there's unusual spending activity during a separation, like $40,000 in 3 weeks, the primary account holder can freeze authorized users to protect credit scores. I flagged the Cabo tickets as unauthorized." "She says you cut off the utilities?" "I removed my name from the utility accounts for the residence I no longer occupy. I notified the electric and gas companies that I vacated the premises. If she wants lights, she needs to put them in her name. I'm not paying to heat a house another man is living in." "She doesn't have any money," the sister cried out. "She spent the $18,000 cash on the ex's recording studio equipment and that stupid trip. She has nothing." "She has a job," I reminded her. "She quit." The sister's voice went up an octave. "She quit the day she told you she was leaving. She told everyone she was going to be a full-time muse and philanthropist once the settlement came through. She thinks she's getting $10 million. Is that true?" I paused, leaning back in my office chair. "Is the ex with her?" "Yes. He's sitting in my kitchen eating my kids' fruit roll-ups. He looks concerned. He keeps asking if she talked to the lawyer about the liquidity event." "Good," I said. "Tell your sister I'll see her at the deposition next Tuesday. Tell her to bring the paperwork from November 2011. "What paperwork? What happened in 2011? "Ask her about her father," I said and hung up. The build-up to the deposition was tense. Her lawyer filed a motion for emergency spousal support, claiming I was financially abusing her by cutting off the credit cards. We went before a judge. My lawyer, Jim, countered with a binder full of receipts showing the $18,000 cash withdrawal and the $40,000 in luxury goods charged in 3 weeks, arguing that she had already appropriated sufficient funds from months of living expenses. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who looked like she'd seen everything, looked at the receipts for the recording equipment and the Cabo tickets. She looked at my wife's lawyer. "Counsel, your client has burned through $50,000 of marital assets in 20 days. Request for emergency support denied. Set a date for the deposition." My wife was stunned. She had to sell some of her designer bags just to pay the retainer for the next phase of legal battles. Tuesday came. We met in the sterile conference room of my lawyer's office. It was cold, smelling of floor polish and old coffee. She walked in wearing a new dress, likely unreturnable, and a look of pure venom. The ex wasn't allowed inside the deposition room, but I saw him waiting in the lobby. He was scrolling on his phone, looking bored, wearing a leather jacket that looked suspiciously like one I used to own. Her lawyer, a loud guy in a suit that was slightly too shiny, slammed a folder on the table. "My client is willing to be reasonable," he started, lying through his teeth. "We want the house, the car, $8,000 a month in alimony for 10 years and 50% of the business valuation. We value the business at $12 million, so a lump sum of $6 million. If you agree today, we won't pursue the forensic audit of your offshore accounts." I don't have offshore accounts. They were bluffing, trying to scare me with the threat of a complicated IRS audit. My lawyer, Jim, didn't even open his folder. He just folded his hands on the table and smiled. It was a shark smile. "No," Jim said. "Excuse me?" Her lawyer blinked. "No alimony, no buyout, no interest in the business. She gets the car if she refinances it in her name within 30 days. She keeps the $18,000 she stole. She vacates the house in 60 days. That is our offer." My wife laughed, a shrill, ugly sound that grated on my nerves. "Are you insane? We were married for 15 years. I own half of you. I own half of everything you built. You can't just decide I don't." I finally spoke. "Do you remember November 2011? She stopped laughing. Her face went slack. "What?" "November 2011. Your father, the gambling debts, the loan sharks involved with the union." She looked at her lawyer, then back at me. That has nothing to do with this. That was family business." "It has everything to do with this," I said. Jim slid a single document across the table. It wasn't long, 5 pages. The paper was slightly yellowed, the edges crisp. "In 2011, Jim narrated, for the record, his voice calm and professional, your father owed $350,000 to individuals who were threatening physical violence against him and your family. You came to my client begging for help. You said you would do anything to save your father." My wife's face lost all color. She started shaking her head slightly. "My client," Jim continued, his voice hard as iron, "liquidated a significant portion of his premarital portfolio, stock he inherited from his grandfather, to pay that debt, a debt that was not his. In exchange, and upon the advice of your own independent counsel at the time, a Mr. Henderson, here is his affidavit confirming he explained the terms to you, you signed a post-nuptial agreement." Her lawyer snatched the paper. He read the first page, his eyes scanning rapidly. Then he flipped to the signature page. His face turned the color of ash. He looked at his client with a mixture of horror and fury. "This agreement," Jim said, his voice hard as iron, "stipulates that in consideration of the $350,000 payment to settle your father's debts, you waived all future claims to the business, its appreciation, and the marital home, which was purchased with the down payment from the narrator's separate inheritance. It explicitly states that these assets remain the sole property of my client." Jim flipped a page. "It further stipulates that in the event of infidelity, defined here as physical or emotional intimacy with a third party while cohabitating, all claims to spousal support are voided." "I didn't cheat," she screamed, slamming her hand on the table. "We were separated. I told him I was leaving." "You admitted to talking to him for 6 months in your opening statement to my client," Jim pointed out. "And you moved him in the night my client left. We have the security footage. We have the text logs recovered from the family cloud account you forgot to disconnect. Texts dating back 4 months where you discuss how you're going to spend the divorce settlement with him." Her lawyer was whispering furiously to her. "Did you sign this? Did you—"
Really sign this? Why didn't you tell me about this? I didn't think it counted, she stammered, tears actually forming now. Real tears. Tears of a future evaporating. That was years ago. We've been married for a decade since then. It's unfair. I was under duress. "It's a valid contract," Jim said. "Notarized, witnessed, and you had independent legal representation. The consideration, the money that saved your father's legs from being broken, was paid. The debt was settled. The contract stands. You can try to argue duress in court, but since you had your own lawyer and took the money, no judge is going to buy it. And if you do challenge it, we will depose your father regarding his association with organized crime figures to prove the validity of the debt." The silence in the room was heavy. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner. "So," Jim concluded, "here is our counteroffer. You keep the $18,000 you took. You keep the jewelry. You get the Jaguar, but you assume the loan. You leave the house in 14 days. If you refuse, we go to trial, we enforce the postnup to the letter, and we sue you for half of the $18,000 you misappropriated, plus legal fees, and we will drag your father's history into the public record." She looked at me, her eyes wide and searching. She was looking for the husband who used to fix everything, the man who paid the bills, who smoothed over her mistakes, who bailed out her family, who funded her hobbies. She found only a stranger. "But the ex," she whispered, he owes people money too. He thought I was getting the buyout." "Not my problem," I said. "You wanted the rock star life. Now you have to pay for the tickets." She looked at her lawyer. He shook his head slowly, closing his folder. He knew it was over. She signed. Her hand was shaking so badly she dropped the pen twice. The aftermath was brutal and swift. She left the office trembling. I walked out 5 minutes later. I saw the interaction in the lobby through the glass doors. She walked up to the ex. He stood up, smiling, expecting a check, maybe expecting to go car shopping. She said something to him, gesturing wildly, crying, pointing at the building. I saw her mouth the words, "nothing," and "postnup." The ex's smile dropped. It didn't fade, it vanished. He didn't hug her. He didn't comfort her. He looked at his watch. He looked at the door. He said something short, turned around, and walked out the automatic doors without waiting for her. 2 days later, the sister called me again. "He left her," she said. Her voice was tired, resigned. "The ex?" "Yeah. The moment he found out she wasn't getting the millions, he bailed. Said he couldn't handle the drama and needed to focus on his art. He stole her laptop on the way out, and he took the bottles of wine from your cellar." "I'm sorry to hear that," I lied. I wasn't sorry. I felt a grim satisfaction. "She's at my house again," the sister said. "Mom and Dad are furious at you, obviously. They're saying you tricked her. They're saying that agreement was blackmail. I saved Dad from prison or the hospital. If they want to rewrite history, that's their choice. But tell your dad that if he contacts me again, I'll forward the 2011 police report I suppressed to the Gaming Commission. He'll lose his pension." The sister sighed. "She wants to talk to you. She says she made a mistake. She says she was confused. She says the ex manipulated her. She wants to come home." I looked around my apartment. It was quiet, no drama. No one spending $500 on throw pillows I wasn't allowed to touch. No one critiquing my career while spending the fruits of it. No one telling me I was boring because I was responsible. She doesn't have a home with me anymore. She has 12 days to get her boxes out of my house before I hire movers to put them on the curb. If she's not out, I'm changing the locks and charging her for storage. You can't be that cold, she pleaded. She's your wife of 15 years. She's having a breakdown. She's the woman who tried to take half of everything I built because she was bored. She's the woman who moved a stranger into my sanctuary before my side of the bed was cold. She made her play. She bet the house, the business, and our marriage on a pair of deuces. She lost. Goodbye. I kept the house. I kept the business. I kept my dignity. I returned to the house after the 14 days were up. It was trashed. Not destroyed, just disrespected. Wine stains on the carpet, mud tracked in, the smell of stale beer and cheap cologne. There were circles on the wood tables where they hadn't used coasters. I hired a cleaning crew. I had the walls repainted. I bought new furniture, stuff I liked, leather armchairs, a pool table in the formal room.